千里之行，始于足下。A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together. Welcome to Tao Talks with Derek Lin, where we take a deep dive into the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. I would like to invite you to center your thoughts and direct your attention to this moment in time, to the here and now. To be fully present and mindfully aware as we all ready ourselves for this sacred process of the Tao. Next, we will be getting into Tao Te Ching 67, one of my personal favorites. Here is the reason why. The title, the Chinese title for chapter 67 is Three Treasures. So this is the Three Treasures chapter. And I know that previously we haven't talked about the Chinese titles very much because usually in Western books about the Tao, those chapter titles are rarely mentioned. I think they do add to the discussion though, because the title reminds you of what the chapter is truly about. That it should begin and end centering on the concept of three treasures. So let's take a look at the chapter, see what it looks like. This chapter, as you can see, is considerably longer than chapter 66, 23 lines. So let me go ahead and read it from the beginning to end to kind of set the stage for our discussion to follow. Everyone in the world calls my Tao great, as if it is beyond compare. It is only because of its greatness that it seems beyond compare. If it can be compared, it would already be insignificant long ago. I have three treasures. I hold on to them and protect them. The first is called compassion. The second is called conservation. The third is called not daring to be ahead in the world. Compassionate, thus able to have courage. Conserving, thus able to reach widely. Not daring to be ahead in the world, thus able to assume leadership. Now, if one has courage but discards compassion, reaches widely but discards conservation, goes ahead but discards being behind, then death. If one fights with compassion, then victory. With defense, then security. Heaven shall save them, and with compassion, guard them. There's a lot to absorb, a lot to digest in this particular chapter. So one comment that I'll offer before we get into the sectional analysis is the expression getting ahead in the world. So note that typically in English, when we say get ahead in the world, we're talking about advancing one's best interests. And this may be, to get a better position at the workplace, to be well compensated for your work, etc. In this particular context, it's actually different. To get ahead in the world, to be ahead in the world in this context is not about any of that. It's about a ego-driven push to be in front of everybody. So not daring to have that ego-driven push is actually a very good thing, as we will discuss. So now let's take a look at the different sections. So scanning from the first line down, right off the bat, I see a repeating pattern. It may not be apparent because lines 2 and 4 are mostly the same, repeating 3 characters. Line 4 has one additional character in front, translated as that. It is also a character that can be translated as so, thus, or therefore. So all of those are fine, but the point here is that beyond compare is repeated in those 2 lines. And then looking a little bit further down, line 5 and 6 says, what if it can be compared? If it is not beyond comparison, then line 6 would already be insignificant. So this is one thought, that it begins with, hey, the Tao is not something you can compare. If you could compare it, it would have already been insignificant. It would not be the Great Dao. So one thought is one section. So we'll put a line there to denote that. Then the next section, this is my favorite section from a favorite chapter about the 3 treasures. Line 7 talks about the 3 treasures, and then it names them. As it names them, it's got 1, 2, 3. You can see those Chinese characters in lines 9, 10, and 11. So with those lines, it is easy to figure out how to very simply write those Chinese characters. It's just a number of horizontal lines, as you can see. But note one thing, those lines are not the same width. So when you want to write that out in Chinese, you can do so. You just got to figure out, you just got to remember the line width, got to keep it the same. So right away, you've learned how to write 3 Chinese characters. Then what we want to do is to identify the similarities between those lines. And you can see that we have one character that is the same among all 3 lines, translated as is called. The first treasure is called so-and-so. The second one is called something else. And then the third treasure. So in the section below this one, this is sort of the introductory section to the 3 treasures of the Tao, the 3 treasures of Laozi. Beyond this section, it'll begin talking about the specific reasons, the details, the descriptions, the things to understand about the 3 treasures. So this right here, introducing the 3 treasures, that's a section by itself. So section 2 is what we have, and it looks like that. Then we want to look further down to identify more character matches on the Chinese side to the left, and then use that as a way to figure out where the dividing lines ought to be. So in line 12, it's talking about compassion, and then 2 characters that are repeated from line 12 to line 13. And then you can see the translation, thus able to. So then the first one there, line 12, that's the first treasure. It's talking about compassionate, thus able to have courage. And that's what we were talking about in 66. The part about non-contentious. And then line 13, conserving, thus able to reach widely. So 2 repeating characters there, but then that's not the end of it because we have 3 treasures. So should we have 3 matches? Indeed we do. And it's found on line 15. As you can see, the same 2 characters translated the same way. So now this section is all about explaining the implications of each treasure. And therefore, it's a section by itself. Now, in the section that follows, Laozi switches it around, 180 degrees turn, where he talks about, well, what if it's the other way? What if you discard those treasures? And then we can look at the Chinese characters and then identify the repeating characters also. So now you can see that 3 treasures, 3 repeating characters, all translated the same way as discards. And what is the consequence of discarding those treasures? Well, line 19, death. So death is the loss of life, which is the loss of opportunities to make further improvements in this lifetime. So this is being used in a negative sense. If you are not able to hold on to these treasures, then death is the consequence. Maybe physical death, but Laozi is also using the term in a broader context about the death of the spirit. So this is a section by itself. And then finally, lines 20 to 23, we have the conclusion. And you can see a couple of repeating characters there as well. And oftentimes, in a concluding section of the Tao Te Ching, there are hardly any repeating characters. In this case, we can find 2 and translate it the same way, them. So we have a chapter here with 5 sections. And notice how previously we have seen many chapters with 3 sections. So these chapters, the length is different, and the divisions of the sections are also different. Now we're ready to talk about the lines one by one. Let's start with the very first line, and we will work our way to the section with the 3 treasures. Line 1 says, everyone in the world calls my Dao great. Let's dissect the original Chinese characters, starting with the first 2 characters. 天下. So the pinyin is written out like that. It sounds like 天下. And the pinyin may be a little bit misleading. So remember, 天下, even though it's written, the second character is written with the X. It is not ja. It's not any exotic sounds like that. It's not, you don't need to click your tongue saying that. You don't need to go kasha. It's just sha. There's no K sound at all. So what does that mean? What do these 2 characters mean? The first character means sky or heaven. The second character means down or below. And you can say beneath. So when you put them together, the meaning is all below heaven. Everything below heaven. Or everything below the sky, which is the world. So in English, we do have the expression under the sun. You might hear people say, well, there's nothing new under the sun. So it's the same idea. Under the sun means the world. When you say there's nothing new under the sun, you're saying there's nothing new in the world. Not necessarily true, but that is the expression. So this can be translated as the world, everything, or everyone, like everybody in the world. So those are all valid translations, and 天下 is what it sounds like. Let's go further into the line, picking out 2 other characters here. 我道. So the first character means I, or mine, or me. So in Chinese, there's no different forms for the same pronoun. It is all the same character, and the grammatical role in a sentence depends on context. Here, It is my, the possessive form. So it is saying my Dao. This is Lao Tzu talking. He's saying, well, my Dao is this and that. So note that my Dao means the Dao that Lao Tzu studies and follows. It is not the Dao that belongs to me and nobody else. It is not a proprietary claim. The path of Lao Tzu is not his alone. Here I need to explain a little bit, because in slightly different angles of meaning, it is and it isn't. And the same is true for everybody. I know that sounds confusing. Let me explain. First of all, the Tao itself belongs to everyone. It's like a road that anyone can walk. It's like a path through a forest. Doesn't belong to anybody. Anybody can hike through the forest, on the paths, on the trails. And at the same time, there are many possible paths. So your path is uniquely your own. Even if you are walking on a paved road, you can be veering to one side or the other side. You can speed up, you can slow down, you can take a break. The path that you carve out on that road is uniquely your own, even though nobody owns that road. Therefore, a Tao cultivator's path, your path, my path, everybody's path, combines guidance. Guidance, what I mean by that, like a map. Map in the spiritual context is like the Tao Te Ching, tells you where to go, what direction to follow, what destination you should be heading to. The other part of it, the uniquely your own part, personal preference. Walk it however you like. So the Tao is something that doesn't belong to you, and yet it is also deeply personal because you are the only one that can walk it. So it's not meant to be a paradox. It's just different ways of looking at the same thing. It's easiest to see and understand when you think about physical roads. Next, let's talk about a character that repeats. This character is Da. Like the characters that you saw for 1, 2, 3, this is a simple character to remember. It's one that, if you wanted to, you can easily learn to write. So what does it mean? It means big, large, great. Could be all of the synonyms that you can recall. Huge, vast, grand, tremendous. It goes on and on. Okay, in this context, it's not just big, like bigger than something else. In this context, it means infinitely big, infinitely vast. So when we put that character together, Da, combine it with the character for Dao, we get Da Dao, the Great Dao. So the Dao is seen as great because it is infinite, without boundaries, without limits. The greatness of the Dao is that it encompasses all possible concepts. Whatever the Tao is, we don't have a full understanding of it. It encompasses the universe, and it goes well beyond, because it's not just the physical universe, but all metaphysical concepts that transcend the physical universe. And when I say all possible concepts, I am definitely including the concept of the multiverse, the concept like hyperspace. Even theoretical concepts are part of the Tao. So the many versions of heaven and hell human beings have envisioned, all of those are concepts that are included in the Tao. All the forms of infinities that human beings can come up with or express through mathematics those are all encompassed in the Tao. So the Tao is whatever that encompasses absolutely everything. That's what makes it great. With this particular slide, we see that the greatness of Tao is depicting the concept of infinity. And this is something that Lao Tzu emphasizes in the lines that follow. So let's take a look at the way that he expresses infinity. First, line 2 says, as if it is beyond compare. So to call something beyond comparison is the ancient way to describe the infinite. Because finite quantities can always be compared, no matter what it is. Another way to say it is that finite quantities are relative. Something is big, something else is small, something is long, something else is short. So finite quantities are relative, infinity is absolute. So no matter how big something is, there is always something bigger. Science says the universe measures 92 billion light years across. Now, surely that is the biggest object of all. The biggest physical thing of all, is it not? Well, scientists also say the universe is expanding. So moment by moment, it is bigger than it was before. And if the current size is the biggest of all, well, the next instant, it's going to be a little bigger yet as the expansion continues. So no matter how big something is, there's something bigger. Everything's relative. And we know that just from our everyday experience living in the real world. A mansion may be big. It may be unbelievably big compared to a regular house. But the mansion is not that big compared to the country that it is in, because that's an entire country with many mansions. The country in turn cannot compare to the size of the world. Even the biggest country in the world is no comparison when compared to the world itself. The world cannot compare to the size of the sun. The sun is far bigger. As big as the sun is, it cannot compare to the size of the galaxy, and so on. So when we talk about all of these things, these are all things that can be measured up to and including the measurement of the universe being billions of light years across. The Tao, on the other hand, cannot be measured at all. It's beyond measure. It cannot be counted. It's beyond compare. So that's the emphasis to explain infinity. It's another way to talk about the Tao being formless. It's not something that can be seen or grasped. It's not a thing, period. So the Tao, closest we can come to it, is to talk about it as the overall principle of existence. Because it's a principle, it's not an object. And we can see physical laws are the same. The laws of nature that we have discovered in science, that we explore through experiments, physical laws rule the universe, but you cannot touch them. You cannot take them. You can't weigh them. They don't weigh anything. They are not things. So it's the same with the Tao. I think in modern times, we're all pretty comfortable with these ideas, but the reason why these are repeated several times in the beginning of 67 is likely because in ancient times, this concept would be challenging. Let's continue. So we have another iteration of the same concept, just to really drive home the point. If the Tao can be compared, then it is like physical objects. And that's line 5, if it can be compared. So the meaning is that, well, is it a physical thing or not? Well, it really isn't. But if it was, then it will be no different from any of the other objects that we see all around us. Then the next line, line 6, it would already be insignificant long ago. No matter how big that hypothetical object may be, any object can be small compared to something bigger. Therefore, the Tao would also be small and not great. Therefore, we can't really call it the great if that was the case. Not only that, but such comparison would have already been done a long time ago. Generations past, people would have already tried to figure out what would be something that's bigger than this physical object that we call the Tao. So none of that has happened because the Tao is formless, beyond compare, no measurements. So this is really the first section that's only focusing on the infinite extent of the Great Dao. Next, Lao Tzu is going to start talking about the concept of the 3 treasures. So this is central to chapter 67. Now, later on, Lao Tzu will also describe why the 3 treasures are basically so congruent, so aligned with the greatness of the Tao. And that ties it together with the first section. But for now, though, we need to zoom in on the concept of the 3 treasures. And I want to explain about the 3 and everything that is implied. Starting with line 7. Line 7 is translated as I have 3 treasures. 我有三宝. Here's the pinyin. So the only thing to watch out for is that the romanization for the second character there, it's actually more like Y-O, Y-O-U. We all have this reflexive need to pronounce it as you, but it's actually yo. 我有三宝. So again, the pinyin system occasionally has little quirks like this. Now, these 4 characters are all very simple characters to translate. The first character can only be translated as I. The second character only has a valid translation, have. Then we have the 3 horizontal lines. You already know what that is. It's 3. And then the last character there, treasures, 宝. 我有三宝. I have 3 treasures. This is one of those cases where a straight, verbatim, literal translation is also the best translation because it is one of the easiest lines in the Tao Te Ching to translate. Despite that being the case, if you look around at different translations, you will definitely find that people have come up with all kinds of different ways to translate the line. So don't be misled. This is what it really means. So then let's talk about the last character there, 宝. In this context, it is not physical treasure like gemstones or diamonds, but it's a principle to live by. It's a virtue to hold dear to your heart. Now, this treasure, it also doesn't mean teaching. It just means treasure. For expressing teachings, there are different words that are much more suitable for that. And I want to also, here's the most important point out of this entire slide. The 3 treasures here is not the only set of 3 treasures, and it's not even that there are several sets of 3 treasures. There are many sets of 3 treasures. So this is just one set of three treasures out of many. You're going to see later on that what Lao Tzu calls his three treasures will be compassion, conservation, and not daring to be ahead in the world, which is just another way to express humility. So those are not it's not even, it's just one of the many sets of three treasures out there. So I want to talk about the many sets of three treasures throughout history. So let me start out with the most ancient perspective of all, perspectives that go back 5,000 years or more. So the ancients, when they observed the world around them, they saw that there are roughly three aspects that they can identify. There is the above, the sky above, there is the ground below, and then there is everybody who's inhabiting this setting that has the sky up above and the ground below. Therefore, they decided to express this as the three aspects of existence. Tian is heaven, and heaven they could see has points of illumination, and these different illuminating things up in the sky can be divided into three sorts. There's the really powerful one during the day, that's the sun. There's one at night that changes according to phases, and that's the moon. And it is certainly not as bright as the sun. It can be quite bright, but never at the level of the sun. Then, the night sky, it is also easy to see that there are many points of light, the stars. Therefore, sun, moon, and the stars will be the three treasures of this higher or upper aspect of existence, the world above, the heaven. Then what about the world below? That's the second character that you see on the right-hand side, D. And here, the ancients looked around and said that, well, we can see water, and occasionally they had already mastered fire, so they can identify fire is another significant element. They notice that water puts out fire. They see that fire boils water. So water and fire seem to make a lot of sense. Then there's also air, which they call wind. Air by itself, when it is nice and still, you cannot really feel that there's air to the ancients. But when the wind blows, you definitely can feel it. So they would characterize water, fire, and wind as the three treasures of earth. Then all these people running around, that's the last final aspect of existence when they're dividing up all of existence in just three broad categories. Humans are running around, so humans must also have three treasures, right? They call them essence, energy, and spirit. So now we need to explain what those are. As you're looking at this slide right here, let me talk about a little bit the origins of all of these. As I mentioned, these are truly ancient. These are the observations of people from 5,000 years or even more thousands of years ago. So a lot of these concepts date back to the time of Huangdi, the Yellow Emperor, who lived roughly 5,000 years ago from ancient observations. And many of these also date back to I Ching, which is the book of changes, also from that long ago. And so, for instance, the different elements of the earth, the treasures of the earth, water, fire, and wind, they are similar to the five elements. The five elements would also add metal, wood, earth, in addition to water and fire. And then when it comes to the three treasures of human beings, well, it actually requires more explanation because these are the three treasures that are talked about a lot in traditional Chinese medicine. So let me identify them for you, the three treasures of human beings. The first one is essence, Jing. This is the essential foundation of your health. So when explaining the different concepts and what the differences are, oftentimes sages will use a candle as an example. So the candle itself, if it was a metaphor for you, that is the candle, the wax, the substance of the candle is the essence of a human being. That's the metaphor. The second one is qi. So qi is sometimes written as qi. That's the new romanization system. And in the older system, it's qi, chi. Either way, it's pronounced the same, qi. And it's got a double meaning. So the ancients used it to talk about the breath, inhalation, exhalation, breathing the air in your lungs, expelling the air. And they also use the same term to talk about energy that courses through your body. So think of it as the burning flame of the candle. So that's an important part of the candle is the flame that burns on it. So a body that has deceased has no flame that is burning corresponding to that. Lastly, we have Shen, and that's the spirit. Shen is your spirit. Think of it as the light that is produced by the burning flame. So the essence of a human being is what gives off the energy, and that's the burning flame of the candle, just like the wax of the candle is the fuel for the flame. And the brightness, the light that's produced by the flame is the spirit. So hopefully that's a metaphor that makes it clear for everyone what that is. And light is spirit eventually is what's going to be talked about in a spiritual practice. And when we talk about enlightenment, we also talk about spiritual illumination. So that's where you have the connection with the light produced by the burning flame. So we have already covered 9 things, which are divided into 3 sets of 3 treasures for heaven, earth, and human beings. And there's more. I want to turn our attention to Chinese culture itself. So this is what we're studying. We're studying ancient thoughts from thousands of years of history of Chinese culture. So throughout Chinese history, there are 3 dominant schools of thought that shape the thinking of generation after generation. Those 3 schools of thought are, number 1, Confucianism. So Confucius lived around the same time as Lao Tzu, a little bit later than Lao Tzu, so he regarded Lao Tzu as his teacher. So roughly 2,500 years ago, a little bit later than that. Then another major thread is Buddhism. Not a big surprise for everyone. So Buddhism also originated around that same time from the Shakyamuni Buddha in India, but it did not spread to China until a few centuries later. So it didn't go back, it didn't go for the ancients in China, it did not go back quite as far as Confucian teachings. And the oldest of all is the Dao. The Dao goes back not 2,500 years ago to the time of Lao Tzu, but roughly at least twice that old. It originated from the writing of I Ching, roughly 5,000 years ago, it was summarized by Lao Tzu 2,500 years ago. So nobody calls these three schools of thoughts the three treasures of Chinese culture. I want to make sure that I caution everyone. That's not a thing within Chinese culture. There's no quote unquote three treasures that are Buddhism, Confucianism, and Taoism. However, I presented this way to suggest that this is a pretty good way to look at things, because if you were to think of them as cultural treasures, because you would then realize that there's nothing to stop you from utilizing all three, nothing to stop you from exploring each one of the three treasures. They are not exclusive to one another, and you can definitely treasure them because of the teachings of wisdom passed down from ancient times. And it is easy for us to realize when we look at it that way that these are not like, sports teams where you have to pick one and then root for that team against the other teams. It is something that you can take all together or selectively elements from each one. It's whatever you want. This is exactly how the Dao is practiced or followed in the culture of its origin. Now, of course, there are always going to be a few people in that originating culture who have a tribal mentality, and they usually express it like, hey, you guys have your own sutras, we have our sutras, keep your hands off our sutras. These are our classics, you guys can't touch them. But these are very few in number. Most people do not approach spirituality or philosophy that way at all. Most people feel perfectly fine to accept the teachings from all three great traditions or pick elements that suit them from each one individually. And this is a message that I want to convey. I'm going to be talking quite a bit about the different schools of thought in these teachings about the Dao, and the reason is because this is the way that it's done in Asia. This is how it's done over there. It's only when it passes through the cultural barrier to our world that there's more of that tribal mentality that I talked about. There's more of that imaginary conflict between Confucianism and Taoism, that they must be at odds. There must be rivals or competitors, that if you subscribe to one, you must look down on the other. You must cheer for one team and boo the other team. Okay, well, that's not the way that all of these elements are practiced over there. I want to make sure everyone keeps that clear. I know that whenever I talk about these other schools of thought, there's always going to be commentaries on that. Now, let me dig a little deeper into these, because all three of these traditions, each one has their set of three treasures. So that's the reason why I want to bring this up. Let's go to Confucianism first. So what are the three treasures of Confucianism? Well, this information is very easy to find in the East, but not so easy in the West. If you were to look it up on the internet, Google will get you back a lot of search results on the three treasures of traditional Chinese medicine, which are the three treasures that we talked about, the three treasures of human beings. So luckily, we have this forum where I can provide that information to you in a way that's very accurate. So the first of the Confucian treasures is wisdom. And Confucius taught that the wise have no delusions, meaning that the wise are not beset with confusion or constant doubts. They're not lost. They're not disoriented. They understand what is going on. They know where they're going. So wisdom is the first treasure. The second treasure taught by Confucius is benevolence. And this is because Confucius says the benevolent have no worries. Why is that? The benevolent are the good and kind people of the world. The benevolence that they have is such that they treat everyone with respect and kindness. They always act in humane ways. That's another treasure of Confucian teachings. Lastly, the third treasure taught by Confucius is courage. Confucius said that the courageous have no fear. Now, think about how in our world, many people are often plagued by fear. That is, they have many what-if questions that all lead in a negative direction. What if something bad happens? What if disasters will strike? What if I lose my mind? What if I lose my means of livelihood? What if the economy tanks, goes into recession, goes into inflation? To have courage from the Confucian perspective means feeling the confidence that because you understand the teachings of Confucius, no matter what happens, you can always fall back on those wise teachings to handle every problem, every issue, every situation. And that is the reason why there's no reason to fear anything. Thus, the courageous have no fear. So all three together, wisdom, benevolence, courage. These are the three treasures of Confucius. And this information, I know, is not easy to find over here. Most of us living in this world, our exposure to Confucius is basically a lot of Confucius says jokes on the internet, in social media, a lot of quotes attributed to him, which are not really Confucian quotes at all. And people also think about fortune cookies as being associated with Confucius. In fact, they are not. So glad to play a role in providing some clarification. Now, let's look at the biggie, which is Buddhism. Buddhism definitely has three treasures, and the three treasures are spoken of quite a bit in the teachings of Buddhism. So the first treasure of Buddhism is the Buddha. And this refers to the Shakyamuni Buddha. Remember, there are many, many Buddhas. This is referring to the origin of Buddhism as we know it today. The Indian sage who taught the teachings 2,500 years ago. So that's the first treasure. And he's named the first treasure as the embodiment of Buddhist essence. The second treasure is Dharma. Dharma is represented here by the Dharmic wheel. And it means basically Buddhist teachings. It's got a dual meaning. Buddhist teachings are Dharmic teachings, and also the Dharmas of the world are the manifestations of the world. Everything that happens, all the things that are tangible or intangible, like intentions, they are all Dharmic manifestations. So Dharma is the second treasure. Here, primary meaning is the teachings of Buddhism. And then we have Sangha. And this term is not as familiar with most, because Sangha refers to people, a group of people, specifically a community of Buddhist practitioners. So in the original formulation of the three treasures of Buddhism, Sangha specifically meant Buddhist monks and Buddhist nuns. And that community would be the serious practitioners of Buddhism. In subsequent years, some have expanded the definition to include lay people who study and apply Buddhist teachings. So they may not be, they may have decided to not go the path of the monk or the nun to renunciate all worldly possessions, but they are included by some definitions into that community. So in Buddhist teachings, the three treasures are precious. Why? Because in terms of metaphoric comparison, in Buddhist teachings, the Buddha is compared to a medical doctor who is tending to all sentient beings to treat their illness. And that illness is the problem of human suffering. And then Dharma is like the medicine that is prescribed that will relieve sentient beings of the pain and suffering that they must go through as they cycle through samsara. And Sangha is like nursing care. It's people taking care of one another, sentient beings watching over one another to keep them on the path that the Buddha had specified to get toward spiritual liberation, healing, and enlightenment. So the three together here, these are the treasures of Buddhism: Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. Now, you may think that we'll be heading into the Dao next, but there's actually one more set to talk about. And what we want to talk about is Huineng. Who is Huineng? Well, he's the sixth patriarch of the Zen tradition, Zen Buddhism. That tradition began with Bodhidharma. Bodhidharma was the first patriarch of Zen Buddhism, but Bodhidharma was also a patriarch that traces his lineage back to the original Shakyamuni Buddha, who was the first patriarch of Buddhism. So Huineng had a powerful, intuitive understanding of Buddhist teachings. And he named three treasures which are worthy of study. So in the Zen Buddhist tradition, the first treasure is awakening. Awakening means spiritual realization. It means enlightenment. It's the goal of Buddhahood. Then the second treasure that Huineng named is correctness. It means right mindfulness, right intentions. These are specifically pointed to by the Buddha as being essential in practicing Buddhism. Then the third treasure named by the patriarch, the sixth patriarch of Zen Buddhism, is clarity. And that's a state of spirituality that is perfectly clear, perfectly pure. So the three treasures of Zen Buddhism, according to Huineng, from the Platform Sutra, are awakening, correctness, and clarity. Now, there is actually a connection between what we're talking about now and what we talked about in the previous slide. So first of all, information on the three treasures of Huineng, Zen Buddhism, also very hard to come by. I think it's easy to find the three treasures of Buddhism, but when it comes to Confucius or the sixth patriarch, very difficult to find in the West. There's a connection that I want to highlight for you. Take a look here at the three treasures of Buddhism. As you saw a couple of slides ago, we've got the Buddha, we've got Dharma, we've got Sangha. How do these connect to what we just talked about from Zen Buddhism? So remember, the lineage of Zen Buddhism traces back to Bodhidharma. Bodhidharma was a patriarch of Buddhism. His lineage traces back to the Shakyamuni Buddha. It should therefore not be a big surprise if what Huineng taught could be easily connected to what the original Buddha taught. So let's take a look at the first correspondence here. look at the connection between the Buddha and awakening. Buddha, the term, literally means a human being who has experienced spiritual awakening, the one who has awakened. And spiritual awakening is the realization of the totality of existence, which is the greater reality beyond the everyday reality that you and I experience in the material world. So, clear connection between the Buddha and awakening. Of course they go together. What about the second treasure there? Dharma has a clear connection to correctness. And why is that? Well, Dharma teachings embody the spiritual truths that the Buddha taught. It's about being right, being correct eternally, no matter what, because these are eternal spiritual truths. And therefore, of course, there's a connection between correctness and Dharma. That which is correct is the Dharmic teaching. Dharmic teachings depict that which is correct about the world. Lastly, Sangha. How can we connect that to the final treasure from Huineng? Well, the practice of Buddhist monks and nuns is meant to clarify and purify the spirits. If done correctly, aligned with the original intentions of Buddhism, the monks and nuns, the Sangha, the community, would live life in the most austere way possible, completely unaffected by elements of the material world, in order to gain that clarity, in order to be spiritually clear and spiritually pure. So, of course, there is a connection between the two. It only makes sense. So, finally, to wrap everything up, we're going to be talking about the three treasures of the Tao. And this is the last set of three treasures that we're going to be touching on, because in our next meeting, it's going to be all about the details of each one of the three treasures. So the first of the three treasures is compassion. And Lao Tzu taught that when you are compassionate, you are enabled to have courage. The second treasure of the Tao is conservation. You can also think of it as being thrift, being frugal, not being wasteful. But conservation is really the best word to capture the spirit. Conserving, thus able to reach widely. And the reason why I say conservation is the best way to capture the meaning is because you can conserve but not necessarily be frugal or thrift. Lastly, the third treasure is not daring to be ahead in the world. Remember, to be ahead is not to gain a benefit for oneself, but specifically here, it's the ego-driven need to push away to the front. To not dare to do that means you have a natural humility. And Lao Tzu taught that when you have that humility, you are able to assume leadership. And this is exactly what we talked about in the previous chapter when we talked about staying low. So now we can see a clear connection between what this chapter talks about and the previous chapter. Our timing is good because we're coming to the end of our time together today. So I want to summarize everything that you have seen and then bring everybody's focus back to the three treasures of the Tao: compassion, conservation, and not daring to be ahead in the world. So I want to suggest to everybody that you and me, we can all start practicing the three treasures like right away. Number one, be compassionate. Let me challenge everyone, along with myself, to be open in this week to come, open to opportunities to say a kind word to someone, anyone, people you come across, in the family, out in public, anywhere. Look for opportunities to practice compassion. Number 2, conserve resources. This treasure begins with awareness. I want to challenge everyone to look around. Can you recognize, identify some wasteful practices that you see around you? Maybe something that you do, maybe something that you see other people do. Either way, this particular treasure begins with you becoming aware of something that is wasteful, unnecessary, could be done in a better way. Number 3, be humble. This, remember, is in the context of a Dao leader who starts out being supportive of everyone. The Dao person is just as glad leading, if called upon to do so, as he or she will be providing support to everybody. So here's the question. What might be a supporting role you can play for other people? Let me challenge you and me to look at all 3 and practice all 3 in the week to come. Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Let us all travel safely so we can meet again. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.